Hi team, and welcome back to the Introduction to Russian History Anchor Fact series. Why is Russia Russia? Why is any country the way it is? The short answer is because of its history. Russia is Russia because it began as Kievan Rus, circa 862 AD, when the Vikings took over the land from the Slavs. Russia is Russia because its leader, Vladimir the Great, decided to make Orthodox Christianity the religion of the land, and the people had to join him, according to the rule later stated as cuius regio, eius religio. Russia is also Russia because for over 200 years, much of it, as it existed back then, was ruled by a people from Asia, known as the Mongols. The Mongols, who are from the area known as Mongolia today, took over China. They were ruling it in the time of Marco Polo. They took over Central Asia. They overran most of the Islamic world and conquered what we call the Middle East. They even conquered much of what is Eastern Europe. This has proven to be a very important fact of Russian history to this day, because the Mongols ruled over what we think of as Ukraine, but they did not rule what we think of as Russia, or at least the northern parts. The Mongols invaded Eastern Europe in the year 1240. They got as far as Poland, and from there they kept control of some of it, especially of today's Ukraine. This caused the capital of Russia to move from Kiev to Moscow. Russia was then known as the Principality of Moscow. When the Mongols controlled Ukraine, the Russians paid tribute to them. This means simply that they sent them money in order to avoid being further attacked. The huge single Mongol empire, which was created by Genghis and Kublai Khan, broke into pieces. But the Mongols in Ukraine stayed there and were organized enough to keep what they had conquered. This situation lasted until 1380, when one of the heroes of Russian culture, Dmitry of Moscow, defeated the Mongols at the Battle of Kulikovo. Of course, Dmitry is featured on the Millennium of Russia monument. The Battle of Kulikovo was what we call in history a turning point. It's when the direction of history changed. In this case, it shows that Russia was getting stronger, while the Mongols were getting weaker. But it wasn't for another 100 years that Russia was able to expel the Mongols. This finally happened because of the Great Stand on the Ugra River in 1480. This is an interesting one. It usually takes a war, or at least a battle, to change the course of history. In this case, however, all it took was the Russians taking a stand. The Russians were on one side and the Mongols on the other. Although there were clashes between them, there was not a great battle to decide anything. The Mongol leaders simply decided it wasn't worth it and decided to retreat. Here's an interesting question. Can you think of any other time when just taking a stand has been good enough? I'll give you a hint. Think after World War II. Another hint is it's also connected to Russian history. That will be covered in the printables activity for this lesson. Soon the Mongols melted away and were gone from Russia. The leaders of Moscow were now in control of the land that had belonged to their ancestors before. One country of Russia and Ukraine. This is terribly important. Many people today wonder why Russia and Ukraine are fighting a war. There are modern explanations, which have to do with the United States trying to take over Ukraine and making them a part of an American alliance against Russia. Much of this is true. But there is a deeper meaning. The deeper meaning is that Russia and Ukraine share the same history. They share the story of the Mongol occupation from 1240 to 1480, where Ukraine, which was previously a part of Russia, was then saved by Russia. This creates a strong link between them. Sometimes ancient history seems to fade away and become unimportant, but in this case it does not. Events that happened over 500 years ago are still a big part of what Russia and Ukraine are today. That's why we study history. We want to understand the world we live in. The Mongol occupation of Russia, or to be more precise, Ukraine, is a big part of the explanation for what today's Russia and Ukraine are. But the Russia we have encountered so far is not really a part of Europe. In the next lesson, we'll see when that connection became much stronger. It was a transformation that made Russia into a partly European country. Our world would not be what it is today if it were not for that transformation. It was enacted by a Russian leader named Peter the Great. For that story, see you next time.